Hello. Uh, I'm just going to sit here and wait for some more people to arrive, hopefully, and then I will get started in a couple minutes, maybe two, maybe not that long. Okay, hello, and welcome to my section of the Revolt Festa. I hope you've all had a really good time so far. I'm going to speak about BTS and the book Revolution, and I hope you're all excited to be with me for this hour or 40 minutes, however long we go for. So I'm going to start by introducing myself. I'm going to explain a bit about why I'm talking to you, and what I will be talking about today. So my name is Oda. I am the publishing director at Revolutionaries, and what that means exactly is something that we will get into later on. I'm Norwegian, but I have lived in the UK for the past 5 years, and I've been an army since 2016. Today, I will be speaking to you about BTS and the book Revolution. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. I have an undergraduate degree in publishing media. I work in publishing, and I'm a massive army. So the intersection of BTS and the publishing world is therefore something I care a lot about, and I have very strong feelings about it. And it's also something I think about a lot. um, so I will speak about where revolutionaries sit in the publishing market and in the overall army space. I will also speak a bit about not revolutionaries, but I will speak about publishing as an industry and the workflows we use internally at revolutionaries. And I will mention a couple things about the broader publishing world and its response to the rise of BTS. Um, and I will speak about how BTS use books in their art and in their music, and how BTS influences and affects the publishing world. We'll also talk a bit about what you can expect from Revolutionaries in 2021. All of it is very, very exciting. And we will have some time at the end for questions. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them, and I will do my best to reply. So let's get into it. So I want to start this off by talking a bit about myself and how I ended up where I am now, how I ended up here. As I mentioned, I became an army in 2016. This was during the first year of my undergraduate degree, and by the end of second year and the start of third year, I had completely fallen down the rabbit hole, as a lot of us do. I had experienced the power of army myself, and I became increasingly more frustrated with the lack of action from mainstream publishing houses. I saw that this was something that would explode, and indeed had exploded into massive popularity over just a few years. I also realized the real potential for publishing here. Books have been an important part of the group's history and growth, and this has in turn influenced the fandom's reading habits. So the Wings album drew from Hermann Hesse's Demian. The music video to You Never Walk Alone was inspired by the sci-fi novel The Ones Who Walk Away from Ormelas. The song Magic Shop. After the song Magic Shop came out, I stumbled across this article that I have taken a screenshot of on screen that said the book that inspired a BTS song is now a bestseller in Korea. I stumbled across this article, and it convinced me that there was potential here. It was also reported that after the release of Magic Shop, the sales of Into the Magic Shop, the book, the sales of that book rose by 510 times its normal amount. And all of this led me to being lucky enough to be able to study this for my dissertation. I wanted to argue that there is potential for publishing here beyond the sort of intro guides to BTS written by faceless non-army authors aimed at a very young audience. I wanted to explore how developing an understanding and an appropriate response to the de-Westernization of popular media is a key step towards being able to commence filling this unsaturated niche within the publishing industry. So I'm not going to take you through my entire dissertation because it is a bit of a monster, and it will take way too long. But I do want to pull out some of the main points that I made and the points that are relevant to what we'll speak about today in this talk. Firstly, I want to dedicate a couple of minutes to talking about who we're dealing with here. Who are ARMY? What was the fandom like in 2018? What is it like in 2021? And the years in between here. Defining ARMY and fandom itself for outsiders and for people not in the in-group can be difficult for multiple reasons. But Walia Eaglehawk, our CEO at Revolutionaries, has put it as follows. Fandom is decentralized and often misunderstood. Fandom is a dynamic, fluid space which is constantly evolving. Fandom provides the basis for a shared vision and nuanced understanding from a wealth of diverse backgrounds, cultures, identities, and practices. I also want to pull out this quote from Zingyuren Lee in Marketing Cross Cultures, which is an academic book, which says that word of mouth communication is likely to be stronger in collectivist and in-group oriented societies. This is most definitely including fan and subcultures, both on and offline. And the society we live in today is hyper-connected through social media, and it's making it easier for subcultures to develop and grow into the mainstream. The digitalization of communication and forming of communities have given the publishing industry invaluable access to new opportunities and market. And understanding that the landscape is changing from a wholly Western approach to a more global reality is essential, and learning to appeal to a global audience is a key point, as the fandom is less tied to physical location because of the hyperconnectedness through social media. So pulling this back to books, I want to get into some specifics. I did primary research where I surveyed members of the BTS ARMY, and I got about 500 responses in less than 2 weeks. This in of itself shows that this is a topic people care about and want more interest in. 500 people is not a lot of people in the grand scheme of humanity or in the grand scheme of ARMY, but it is quite a few people for some random survey from an undergraduate student with little or no social media ARMY presence when this was happening. So the interest in this was massive, and my lecturers told me to stop taking in more answers because there would be too much data to deal with. So this shows that people care and people want to help, and they want to contribute to this research and this landscape. The clear inspiration from arts and literature increases the interest by consumers to interact with the source material directly. This is an interesting aspect in terms of BTS, where the books are published without any intent or really no intent of relation to a certain artist or group, but through association or inspiration, it becomes important to the fandom. Specifically for BTS, that means books like Jung's Map of the Soul, Demian, Into the Magic Shop that I mentioned earlier. And these have a clear connection to the Bangtan universe. And many fans choose to read these books to hopefully get a better understanding and a chance of unraveling the storyline. So we can see, I think this should be big enough for people to read on screen. But we can see that Demian is topping the list of titles that people have bought because of BTS. The ones who walk away from Omalas and Into the Magic Shop are following suit shortly after. And my research also showed that ARMY own a lot of books. Nearly 30% answered that they own over 100 books, and only 8% stated that they own 0 to 5 books. 31% of people said that they have bought a book directly because of BTS, and another 27% said that they hadn't yet, but they would like to in the future. So this shows that the intersection of ARMY and books is a real point of interest, both for, or well, mostly maybe for consumers. Us consumers want this. And a wish for both scholarly research and trade publishing to interact with the fandom was strongly present. The patriarchal discourse happening in media when talking about sort of crazy fangirls diminishes the diversity and the accomplishments of this group of people. The future of all media is intersectional, diverse, and representative, and embracing these emerging subcultures lead us one step closer to this inevitable reality. Without sufficient understanding of the market and without sufficient understanding of the market, the correct tools cannot be utilized to have products reach its full potential. Catching subcultures at a moment where they are popular, yet the market is not saturated to a oversaturated, is a key point in expanding within subcultural movements. The general interest for books within the fandom and Bigger Hit themselves taking advantage of these opportunities by publishing the notes and selling a couple of titles mentioned earlier in their online shop is evidence that there is a market here for the publishing industry to utilize. If you want to hear more about consumer insight and the reader personas, please make sure to tune into Trisha's talk that is happening right after mine at the top of the hour. So after hearing Walia speak at the Rhizome Connect conference in August 2020, I got in touch with her on Twitter. She mentioned in the talk that she was looking for someone to assist with the publishing aspect of Revolutionaries, and I cheekily put myself forward as a candidate. Shortly after, I started working for Revolutionaries. So I've been with Revolutionaries for now about 6 months, 5 months, something like that. The concept of time is difficult at the moment. So who are we? What books do we publish and for whom? I want to preface this with the fact that we do not only publish for ARMY or about BTS, but we publish we participate in the broader publishing world and broader topics of publishing. I will, however, focus mainly on BTS and ARMY, as evident from my previous slides. That is sort of my main knowledge pool. I think what Walia writes in I Am ARMY is a good introduction to where we see ourselves. So Walia wrote the following as a result of being rejected by agents and editors, and they said her work was too niche or better suited for Asian studies instead of a mass appeal. And Walia writes, If publishers do not see the value of publishing books about BTS, that meant there was a gap in the market. I realized that perhaps everything I had been doing since I became an ARMY was leading me to this moment, though I experienced it as a jolt of realization rather than a steady acceptance. I had to start my own publishing company. I had to create the opportunities that I, and presumably many others, so greatly needed. Walia also says that through Revolutionaries, I want to locate, document, value, and celebrate the diverse voices of ARMY in the form of books that can uplift, inspire, and comfort. This is partially what we want to do. At our core, we're here for the modern day revolutionary. We see fandom as transformational and revolutionary spaces. We are located inside fandom while facing outwards towards the general public. We publish for an array of audiences. Some overlap and some have a particular interest in a title or an imprint. As Walia wrote on a texture published on Medium, she writes that perhaps the element of new comes from us taking fandom seriously, or fandoms. We see the intrinsic and extrinsic value in fandoms and seek to build connections and community within them, and showcase them to the general public in ways which are educational, accessible, and transformative. This is our ethos and this is our goal as a company. And now I will go more into the specifics of who we are in terms of our books. So, we want to be located inside fandom, but we are facing outwards towards the general public. We do not only publish books about BTS and ARMY, but each of our departments, called Imprints, reflect different aspects of BTS. An imprint, I'm first going to just define an imprint because it's a publishing term, so maybe everyone don't know it. So an imprint is sort of a subgroup of a publishing house that publish books targeting a similar audience. It can be science fiction, it can be classics, etc. In a bigger team, you would have one team per imprint, but as we're quite small still, we are all involved in all the imprints. However, we do have some people that are more focused on one imprint over another based on their particular skill set. So inside the imprints, we have lists, and these are subsections of the imprints again, of titles that thematically fit together. So for example, a classics imprint might have a modern classics list. This doesn't mean that the books in the list have to be read as a series, but there should be a common list identity that makes readers able to understand the thematic connection between the titles. For Revolutionaries, you have the following. As I said earlier, we want our imprints to reflect parts of BTS, not necessarily being about BTS, but we want the greater ethos of BTS as a group to be reflected in the way we publish. I'm sorry. I'm not used to speaking this much because I'm just at home in my office. So speaking for more than 20 minutes at a time is something new. Hasn't happened for my vocal cords in about a year. But here we go. So you have Revolutionaries, which is our first imprint. It's where we published Idle Limerence, which is our first title. Idle Limerence is a Revolutionaries title. And Revolutionaries wants to reflect the political activism aspect of BTS. And we also have published books such as 5 Essays for Freedom and The Revolutionary Social Worker. Revolutionaries is a contemporary for contemporary cross-genre works for the modern day revolutionary. Our Bulletproof imprint reflects ARMY. Bulletproof is by ARMY and both for ARMY and for the curious onlooker. We have published the titles I Am Army, a book of personal essays on the army identity, and Bring the Spirits, which is an army-made drinks manual. And we, Army, want and deserve to be documented this way because the way Army is operating is extraordinary. And this year, we are launching, and I'm pleased to announce the video for our third, not the video, the logo. We are announcing the logo for our third imprint, Moonrise, which you can see on the screen. Moonrise reflects the creative side, and our first Moonrise title is going to be released early this year, so in a couple months. And this will kick off our list of literary works to uplift and transport the mind of the modern day revolutionary. So far, we have about 13 titles confirmed for 2021. So we have a really busy year ahead of us. And these are our books. This is Revolutionaries books. And now I'm going to go into the creation of these books. How are they made? How did they turn into books? So, what is my role? My role is publishing director. And well, with other titles such as director of marketing or communications director, you can deduce some sort of vague meaning from the name. You understand that a marketing director deals with the market, deals with marketing. But publishing director is quite vague, and it can mean a lot of things, and it does mean a lot of things. But what it means for me and for my role is that I take the manuscript and turn it into a book. I'm involved in the whole process of making the book and work with other departments. I do not deal with the content of the text, and I do not deal directly with our market and our customers, but I do everything else in between. So once the writer and the editorial team have finished their work, I get the manuscript. This is usually just a Word file or a Google Docs file. This would normally be the job of a designated typesetter, but because we currently have a small team, I'm sort of a potato in this regard. I do a bit of everything, and I take on a couple different hats. So I make the file into a book that we can market and sell. So I do this because selling just a Word file or just a PDF wouldn't be the same. We do, of course, sell ebooks that can be read as PDFs, but they do have these elements that makes us think, this is a book. This is not just a document that someone's imported from Word. So my job does, however, start long before the delivery of the manuscript. In fact, it starts as soon as we know about the title. Once we know the title and where it sits in our imprints, I make all the physical choices that make it a book. And when I say title, I don't mean the literal title of the book. I don't necessarily need that. I just need to know that there's a book and it's happening. And this is the kind of theme that it's about. That's all I need. And I can start working. And I should start working to make my job easier for myself. So once we know the title and where it sits in our imprints, I make all the physical choices that make it into a book. So the size of a book, let's see, we have two examples here of different sizes. You can see this is a much bigger book than I'm Army. It's bigger. And I also look at the type of paper that we're going to print it on, the typeface, the size, the margins. Are we printing, I'm going to bring the spirits again, but are we printing internal images? If so, does the paper that we've chosen is the paper we've chosen able to carry that much extra ink? And how do we make sure that the paper doesn't get, or it doesn't rip when it's printed on with lots of heavy ink? And how do we make sure it doesn't bleed through? And where are the page numbers going to be? All these choices I need to make and take into account. And all these things that people don't really notice. But they can be very annoying if they've been done incorrectly. My job is to make it look like a coherent package that is easy for our marketing team to market to its intended audience in a form that is accessible and desirable to them. So, how does this happen? A lot of it is quite technical, so I will not go through that now because that would probably take just 15 hours of explanation, and we do not have that kind of time. Most of my non-collaborative work is done in Adobe InDesign, which is sort of a sister of Adobe Photoshop, which a lot of people have heard about. And it's a software specifically for handling documents with a lot of text, and it is very powerful and can do a lot of things, and it makes my heart very happy when I get to use it. So at the moment, this is a big part of my job. And once all these changes are made and I've been working on it, this takes hours upon hours, I make sure it looks okay. I need to look, for example, for those paragraphs that, go over one page and then you have like one sentence left on the next page. Those can be really annoying, and we want to try to avoid that. And all these things combined make for a pleasant reading experience. And we want our readers to be able to easily take in the text, and the way it's presented to you is not going to be hindering you from getting what it's trying to tell you. So I want to make it something you don't notice. I don't want you to notice that I'm here in a way. I don't want you to notice that I've made these choices, because I want them to just make sense straight away. So we make sure the typeset, or I make sure the typeset is delivered on time, so that we have time to print a proof and check it, checking for those things that we might not have noticed on a digital screen, or things that we wouldn't notice until we actually have the printed copy. So, for example, the margins are too small and the text is being swallowed by the spine. Those are things you wouldn't necessarily notice on the screen, but that can be very annoying if it's happening. So those are the kinds of things that I do. My decisions also inform the cover design and the visual layout. So, for example, the spine width is dependent on the number of pages, of course, and also the thickness of the paper. And this tells the cover designer how much space they have to play with and how to best fit what needs to be on the outside of the book on the outside. We also offer ebooks in Kindle, which is a completely different software and a completely new kind of treatment. So that's a whole other process. It's significantly easier, but it's still a whole new thing. So there's a lot of technical tasks in my role. To me, they're perfect. I love it. But for some people, that would be their worst nightmare. So we all have our strengths. So interestingly, the actual printing process is not something I necessarily need to care as much about as a traditional person in book production would need to in a bigger publishing house. This is because we use something called print on demand. And what this means is that once someone orders a book is printed. There is not a warehouse of stacks of books already printed. So once a book is ordered, we send the order to our print on demand suppliers, and they print and bind the book, and then they send you the book directly from their offices. So the suppliers already have the file, and they just need to print it and bind it and send it to you. There are pros and cons to this method of printing. It is best suited for small publishing houses or for very old backlist titles that maybe sell like 3 copies a year. And for bigger publishing houses, for us, it's perfect for everything at the moment. And for us, the pros outweigh the cons. So I'm going to set up a bit of a scenario. So say we print 500 copies. 500 is a small print run, but it's good for the scenario to use. So say we print 500 copies, we get a book printer to print 500 copies for us. First of all, we would have to pay for those upfront, so there would be a much higher potential for loss. We also need to store them somewhere. What would be the best place to store them? Who has space in their house to store 500 copies of one title? We also have customers across the world. So this would mean that the person that would be unlucky and end up with all the copies, they would have to, every time we get an order, they would have to physically pack it themselves and send it from their local post office. And this would make things take just a lot longer. Our suppliers has printing plants across the world, I think in the US, in the UK, in Australia, and I think in Germany as well. And it's printed as locally as possible based on where people order from. So if you order from the US, it's printed in the US, it's not printed in Australia and then sent halfway across the globe. This means that we save on resources and emissions from sending something across the world as well, which is very nice, to be able to not have to feel that sort of burden. Print on demand also means that there's a much lower risk for us as a company. Say we order 500 books and we only end up selling 100 copies, we'd still have to pay up front for the 500 copies and we would not get our money back if we didn't sell them. We would be sitting on 400 copies. We can't return them to the printer because they've done their job. It's not their fault that we didn't calculate correctly. This is luckily something we don't have to worry about when we use print on demand. And it's a relief and it makes it a lot easier for us to operate as a small publisher. This also means that we can be a lot more reactive. We don't have to place an order with the printer months in advance. We can, in theory, upload the file to our supplier's website the day before the book launches, as long as we've had it checked as a printed proof prior to this. This means that we can work right up until launch. The third massive pro is the ability to make edits quickly. So say you print 500 copies, you get the 500 copies, and you notice there's been a mistake in the typeset. For example, the author's name is misspelled on the cover, and no one's noticed. What do? If you have these 500 copies, you can't really do anything about it. You can pulp them, but then you've lost that money. With print on demand, you can quickly, in just a couple of hours, make those edits and re-upload the file. That would mean that everyone that ordered after the oh god, I'm so sorry. There we go. So that would mean that everyone that ordered after the mistake was noticed would have a corrected copy, and obviously we can't do anything about the ones that have been already sent to customers, but we can quickly make edits and make sure it doesn't appear that way on more books. Another very big pro is that our books do not sell out. It is impossible for them to sell out because they are not pre-printed copies to sell out. Some of the cons are things like cost per copy. If we order 500 copies up front and sell all 500 copies versus selling 500 copies through print on demand, we would get a bigger profit if we did the big print run. However, this would mean a lot of stock planning and making predictions based on trends, and we do not have the capacity for that at the moment. So yeah, this is print on demand. I never thought I would speak this much about print on demand in my life, but I do find it really fascinating, and it's a new kind of way of looking at publishing books, which is interesting. So this has been a basic introduction to how we do books at Revolutionaries, and we are going here now. Where does this leave us? So at Revolutionaries, we publish books for the revolutionary. We publish books for ARMY. We publish books for anyone who might fall in between. We want to create books that would make BTS proud and them take fandom seriously as a transformative and dynamic space. Through my research, I have seen that this is something ARMY want, and to us, to ARMY, or well, to us at Revolutionaries, and to everyone in the world, hopefully, ARMY is a true microcosm of humankind. This is just the start of our journey as a company, and the entire team are very much looking forward to the rest. At the very end, I would like to leave you with this. The core message of BTS's work focuses on self-love and expression of identity, a rare thing in today's media landscape. Walia writes that some companies call ARMY and fandom niche, but one look at BTS's 31.9 million Twitter followers begs the question, is a market of 31.9 million people considered niche? Should it be so easily dismissed? A very final note, this was written about 2 weeks ago, so the number is now, of course, outdated. It's currently 32.2 million as of an hour ago. Might have been more now. Who knows? It moves fast. So, are there any questions for me? Let's see. I'm going to just make my own screen a bit bigger so I can actually see what Diane is asking. Is the very big task of typesetting made easier if you're interested in the topic? Not necessarily. It might actually make it more difficult because I end up getting swallowed up reading paragraphs upon paragraphs. So what I try to do when I typeset is I don't read it, because I would just get like snippets here and there. So if it's a topic I'm very interested in, I would probably just sit there and read the text as I was working on it, and get distracted. So if it's something that I'm not uninterested in, but if it's something I'm like, okay, I'm going to wait until I have the physical book, then I'm going to sit down and read it. Or if I can wait and read it on my own time, that kind of makes it easier. But then again, on the other hand, if I'm very interested in the topic, I want it to be done so I can just read it and so that we can share it with people. So I wouldn't say there's a sort of yes or no answer to this, but it is kind of affecting the way I work and the self-control that I need to put on myself when I work so that I don't just sit and read a very long book instead of doing my job. So, what is my favorite part of the publishing process? Thank you, Walia. What is my favorite part? So I'm a massive production nerd. I think book production is massively fascinating. And it's also something I think is easily forgotten. So for me, the different solutions people make and the small choices that make a massive impact, that's what makes my heart sing. It's the seeing people make great choices, or one of my favorite things actually is figuring out a problem that I've had. So if I work in InDesign and I'm like, oh, this is a problem, I can't fix this, how do I fix this? And then I find a problem. That is probably my personal sort of favorite. It's a bit selfish, but it also makes me incredibly happy to see people have our books physically hold something that I've looked at on a screen for so many hours is incredibly rewarding. So I think maybe that is one of my favorite parts as well. And there's a final question. So, is there any trial and errors? I mean, like, how long or how many versions do you go through before setting on the final one? Different fonts, papers, etc. So in the beginning, there's a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of style tests, and this is why I also said that my job starts as soon as I know the title, because then I can start thinking. I can start thinking about what kind of font are we going to use, and what kind of paper is going to work best, and what size should it be, so that I can have all these decisions ready for when the book is ready to publish. Oh, well, not, but I jumped ahead here. So have it ready for when, oh my goodness, my brain stopped working, for when I get the delivery of the manuscript, so that there's minimal trial and error with the actual text. This is also made easier by our lists that are developing. I mentioned lists in a sentence earlier, but basically it's books that match. So for the next book in the Revolutionary Social Worker list, I wouldn't have to make all these choices again, because they've already been made for the prior titles. So as we get more comfortable with our titles and with our lists, this decision, the work of the deciding where everything's going to be, is going to be less work, basically. So yeah, it's a lot of work in the beginning, and then it sort of falls down to being less work, but there's always new challenges and things that happen with each unique title. Okay, I think that's everything. Thank you so much for listening to me. It's been really fun, and I just want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for your questions, and make sure to tune into Trisha's talk in about 20 minutes, 18 minutes at the top of the hour. I think it's going to be really, really interesting and really great. It's about consumer insight and reader personas, which is a really, really interesting topic. And we also have our summit, which is, for some people it's tomorrow. For me, it's in about 9 hours. Well, I guess it's in about 9 hours for everyone, but if that's tomorrow or not, it's dependent on where you are. I think it's been 9 hours. It's all on our social media pages anyway. So I think the summit is going to be really interesting as well. So yeah, thank you so much for listening, and have a great rest of your day.